Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guests Jasper Sanchez and Ife Franklin. Jasper serves as the Assistant Curator at the Boston Public Art Triennial, a dynamic organization dedicated to supporting, facilitating, and promoting public art throughout the city of Boston. Ife is a highly accomplished, multidisciplinary artist and author whose work honors the lives and history of formerly enslaved Africans, African Americans. Along with Matthew Okazaki and Hugh Hayden, Ife is also one of the contributors to the Boston Public Art Triennial's exciting initiative called Lot Lab, a public art program transforming vacant lots into vibrant, creative, and experimental gathering spaces, with the current installation entitled Presence located at the Charlestown Navy Yard. During the program, we learn why and how the Boston Public Art Triennial and Lot Lab came about. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour of the very engaging and thought-provoking artwork at the Charlestown Navy Yard, and in the process come to better understand and appreciate the talents and contributions of Ife and the other artists, as well as be reminded of the importance and value of having public art in our communities. We have a lot to cover, so let's start by meeting our guest. Welcome. So delighted you're both able to be here.
Hello, Jay. It's such a gift to be able to be back and share the second iteration of Lot Lab with you, especially with Ife.
For sure. You know, Ife, as we've talked last week, I had the good fortune to visit the Charlestown Navy Yard, view your work and the others at Lot Lab, eager to learn more and have you and Jasper inform viewers. But before we get right to that, I think it would be of interest just to have both of you briefly share a little bit more maybe about your background or professional artistic interest. Jasper, would you please start?
Absolutely. As Jay has mentioned, everyone, my name is Jasper A. Sanchez. I'm Assistant Curator with the Boston Public Art Triennial. The Boston Public Art Triennial was formerly known as Now and There, and I joined them a couple of years ago as a curatorial fellow before assuming the role that I have now. In my own experience and research interest, I have a background in art history with a focus on diaspora studies and globalization, and I bring that into my role here, working with local artists to help bring their visions to life in public space and really evaluating the history of our city and our public landscape.
Wonderful, wonderful. Could you just share a little bit more about the Public Art Triennial?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, the Boston Public Art Triennial was formerly known as Now and There. Now and There was a nonprofit public art curator founded in 2015 that had the mission of bringing bold, free, and contemporary public art project to all of Boston's communities. We've recently shifted that model after 9 years of excellence and having artists from all over the world bring their work to Boston. We've presented works at Upland's Corner with Nick Cave and Faneuil Hall with Juan Obando, on the Boston Common with Janet Zweig, amongst many others. And our organization realized that in order to have more impact, to support local artists more, and to really help Boston be put on the map as a leading public art city, we needed to transition from annual and intermittent public art programming in certain neighborhoods to one giant triennial, or a public art festival that has 15 projects all over the city at once. So we shifted quite recently at the beginning of 2024, changed our name, changed our brand, and are moving towards this new direction, really with the goal of bringing art to all over the city and help make Boston become more open and welcoming and vibrant for visitors, and put Boston on the map as a leading contemporary art city.
And two of the features are Lot Lab, and I know the Public Art Accelerator. Just a couple of words about each.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you asking. Folks have asked us, what's happening to your existing programs? What happens when it's not a triennial year, as triennials only happen every 3 years? And despite this rebrand and this change, we're committed to our work of fostering local artists. And so we're continuing to run a program called Lot Lab, which we're speaking about today, a commitment to a neighborhood for 3 years at a time, where we return to that neighborhood, invite artists to respond to its history, and present public artworks. And we're also committed to a program we have called the Public Art Accelerator. Every year we have an accelerator open call where we invite local artists who are interested in learning about public art and how you can produce it in the city of Boston, and to go through a 14-week series of workshops where we share our resources, our connections with them, and then provide them a grant funding to execute that project in any one of Boston's neighborhoods.
Terrific, terrific. Well, look forward to hearing more throughout our discussion, but for now, want to welcome you, Ife, and if you'd please share a little bit about your background and artistic professional interests, please.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Jay. I think this is really wonderful. And I didn't know the connection with you and Lot Lab prior, because I was thinking, how did you find out about me? How did you know about the project? So that's really wonderful. And I really give you kudos for pronouncing my name correctly. Woo. Like that's a big one. So thank you.
Wow.
My name is Ife Franklin. I am originally from Washington, D.C. I've been a working, practicing artist since I was 16 years old. I just turned 64 this year. I started my artistic journey in the realm of photography. I really wanted to be a photojournalist at some point. I studied at an after-school arts program in Washington, D.C. called the Lemuel Penn Center, that I do believe then transitioned into the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, but that was a few years after that was like maybe 15 years after or 10 years after I had graduated from high school. Many of the instructors that were at the Lemuel Penn Center eventually ended up at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts. I developed with the help of these wonderful mentors. And I will say this, that my photography mentors were two African American individuals. And one of them was queer, which was just really wonderful for me as a youth coming out as queer at that time in the late 70s. Mm-hmm. So from that program, I built a wonderful portfolio, and that was before digital photography. So I had learned through them to shoot with the 35mm camera, to develop my own film and print my own pictures, my own images. So with that portfolio, I applied to 3 different art schools: Minneapolis College of Art and Design, Kansas City Art Institute, California College of Arts and Crafts, which is now California School of the Arts. And my first choice was Minneapolis College of Art and Design, because it wasn't too far away from home, Midwest. And I had never been to the Midwest before. I got on I packed my things, I got on a plane and studied there for 2 years. And then 2 years later, I transferred to California College of Arts and Crafts. I left the school for a while. I dropped out of college, came to Boston, and finished my degree at School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. While I was at museum school, I went in to finish in photography. And then, of course, as it is in all art colleges, you get exposed to so many other art practices. And I fell in love with many different things. The Art of Africa that was taught by my mentor, Stanley Pinkney, is where I learned everything about Adiade fabric dyeing, which is the Adiade is the Yoruba name for fabrics. So I learned how to become an indigo dyer and an expansive dyer, not just of indigo and not just of one technique. So graduated, did 5th year through their school, didn't win, was really devastated because I wanted to win for Stanley. I wanted to win for that department because fibers had never won. And I was so devastated. I remember crying, and Stanley said, "You didn't lose." And I was in tears. I'm like, "What do you mean? I lost. I lost." And he said, "No, you have so much work that you can now take out into the world." And I feel like that, taking that work and taking actually him with me, he's still my mentor. I still
Hmm.
visit him, um, is what led me to Ife Franklin's Indigo Project. Stanley, my education, Stanley's total belief in me, and visitation from my ancestors. I have direct communication with them, and they lead me in the ways that I need to follow with my work and the projects.
Wonderful. Well, we definitely look forward to seeing some of your work shortly. And I just have to say how prolific you are reading online. Your Vita, I mean, wow, you have been busy since those early days.
Thank
But
you.
getting back, Jasper, to the Lot Lab and this year's theme of presence. A little bit about the background, the history, why that came about, and your intent, the goals for this installation, please.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to share that with you. So this iteration of Lot Lab is the first that I've had the opportunity to lead the curation on and the thematic framing with from beginning to finish. And I think it's important before I elaborate on the theme of presence too much to share some context and talk about Lot Lab and Charlestown as a whole. So as we know, Lot Lab is a mission and a response to the challenge of creating impactful community-informed art and meaningful site-specific installations. And we want to return to the same neighborhood year after year. And what I've realized is like a creative and speculative archaeology that gives us an opportunity to unearth new narratives over the years. And Charlestown in particular has a very interesting history to grapple with. Part of our mission is to use the power of art to challenge our city's cultural identity. And we do that by exploring untold stories and holding space for open debate, honest reconciliation, commemoration, and restorative or creative justice, which is definitely something Ife's practice and work does. And the site that we're at is informed by generations of intertwining narratives, from the colonial dispossession of the land from Native Indigenous populations to the establishment of the Navy Yard itself in 1798 as an effort toward building a united nationhood, to the labor and naval service of formerly enslaved African Americans, the establishment of Irish, Italian, and Latin American migrant communities, to women laborers during World War II, all the way up until its decommissioning in 1974. So naturally, our site for Lot Lab becomes this extremely complex site of multiple intersecting and often conflicting histories. Like all American land, its history is fraught with compromises, with accommodations, with aspirations, and violence. And during our research, as we were thinking of a theme, we've always come up with some of the fragmented histories and tensions that are related to Charlestown and the Navy Yard in particular. I've heard from many Black Bostonians that they grew up being told to avoid Charlestown because it's not safe, because of its history of segregation and racism and violence. Lots of folks don't come out because they view it as touristy or inaccessible. And some artists I've been in conversation with or community members have reservations about the site. I myself did as well because of what it could represent regarding the US's military legacy in our nation's own history of global imperialism. And so this year we invited 3 artists, Ife Franklin, Hugh, Hayden, and Matthew Okazaki, to reimagine how we can engage with some of these challenging histories and help us create prototype monuments responding to a theme as part of the City of Boston's unmonument, remonument, demonument. And in this image you're sharing from left to right, it's Hugh, Ife, and Matthew. And so the theme for Lot Lab 2024, given all of this context, and thank you for bearing with my lead up, is presence. And we wanted to think of presence because I started asking myself and talking about artists, how can we go beyond categorizing people and stories as untold? There's this movement in public monuments, in public art, in landmarks, and in contemporary art as a whole of people wanting to tell stories that are untold or lesser recognized. And perhaps it's curatorial semantics, but I started asking myself, what does it mean to frame something as untold? How can that change how we approach it? And this theme was really driven by early research into artists like Ife, who their entire body of work isn't about absence, isn't about things being untold. It's about acknowledging and celebrating the fact that history and our ancestors are present and alive all around us. So at La this year, we invited artists to respond to presence. We know of presence as a form of representation, right? Monuments who represent places or wars or things that happened. We were also thinking of presence as the intangible presence of our nation's ancestors all around us, when you can feel someone or a spirit somewhere with you. And we're even thinking of presence critically, where we're thinking of the presence of trauma and injustice embedded in communities and in historically marginalized communities and people, all to help us imagine what healing and welcoming can look like for all in public space.
Fantastic, fantastic. Really appreciate the thoughtful background, which leads us back to you, Ife, and your incredible contribution entitled The Resurrection of Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe. Before we look at it closely, some of your thinking of why and how it came about, what you hope this installation gets across to viewers and visitors.
Thank you so much. Well, where do I begin? Jasper, I was involved in an ancestor procession at Cops Hill's burial ground, which is not far from the Navy Yard, actually, at all. Stone's throw away. When I received a grant from Olmsted Now, when the anniversary of Olmsted and the creation of the parks. And Jasper was one of the witnesses, one of the people who was there at that procession. And I actually forgot that Jasper was there because they were so quiet. You know, they're not in any of the photographs or anything like that. And there was just so much energy and activity. And when Jasper gave me, rang me up and said, I would love to talk to you about a project to see if you're interested in this project. I hadn't put the two together until after we were in the project. And I was like, oh, that's right. You were at the procession. So I met Jasper at Charlestown Navy Yard, where Jasper, of course, talked to me about the project, about the theme, and also talked to me about. I don't remember you talking to me about other stories. I remember the story of Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe. Also because of the work that I've been doing with ancestors and the enslaved. So once Jasper shared the story with me, I knew I wanted to be involved. There was just no question in my mind at all that I wanted to. When I heard the story, I had so many feelings. I was overwhelmed. I was very hurt. I was angry because Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe. I was angry because their situation of oppression drove them to do what they did. They didn't murder John Codman because, they took that route because they had no other course of action. They had no other ways to turn. And I was really hurt when I realized, when Jasper, I did some reading and to find out that they wanted a different enslaver. Like, these are your choices, to stay with him or try to get a better master, which there's no such thing. but this was some of their thinking. And John Cobman had been a harsh enslaver. John Cobman, and personally, I think the straw that could have broken the camel's back for Mark was when John Cobman sold his son away. That would, I mean, and I thought, this is terrible and so heartbreaking. And then when I found out that they were executed and the way that they were executed, a lot of times when you read slave narratives, you don't know how people met their maker or how they died. But these details were, I mean, you could read them online. And my conclusion was, I knew that I wanted to do something to soothe their souls. I knew I wanted to do something to uplift their names, because when you Google the story of Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe, you just get the trauma, you get the tragedy, you get the pain. And that's how they left this earthly plane. So I really wanted to create an art piece that showed them love, that showed them honor, that a place for them to rest. And at first I thought I wanted to build, at first I was just focused on Mark, and I was thinking, okay, I want to create a replica of the gibbet, which was his final resting place after he was tarred and then hung. And then I would put an effigy of Mark inside of it and cover it with the indigo fabric, which is basically my trademark on a lot of my work. And then that didn't include the other two individuals. Also, the ancestors said, no, not that. So then I thought, okay, neither one of them received a proper burial. So then I could construct a coffin. I knew whatever it was, I knew I wanted it to be hanging as he was hung. And also, I wanted it to hang because I really believe that their spirits have not been eased, that they're still hovering around the Navy Yard, hovering around, and they don't have a place to rest. So I also thought about a coffin and covering the coffin and hanging the coffin. And I remember saying to Jasper, I want to hang this in the place where Mark was hung. But that was specific. It was the line, the property line, I guess you would say, of Charlestown and Somerville. And this extended outside of the lot, so we couldn't do it. And then the old souls, as I call them, a lot of times of the ancestors came to me and said, no, a cocoon, a cocoon. And I was like, whoa. And because a cocoon represents transformation, it's a place of transformation, it's a place of rest. And also this cocoon harkens to, or is directly related to, as far as I'm concerned, the blue bottle trees that the Gullah Geechee folks in South Carolina used to catch the spirits of, as they would say, haints, and they would be inside of these blue bottles. I knew that I remember asking Jasper, like, can I use indigo fabric? Like, I don't know if that has anything to do with Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe, because indigo is from the South. And Jasper was like, this is a part of your art making. It should be this. So Jasper had also helped me out. Jasper here, he had shown me there was this particular sculpture is connected to it's not connected to another artist, but Jasper showed me renderings of another artist who did a piece that was hanging in this way.
Yes.
And I don't remember that artist's name.
I'm happy to share briefly before handing it back to you. So in our research process, we leading up to the development of the theme of presence, I was able to go on an incredible research trip to the National Mall in Washington, D.C. last summer. And there was a public art exhibition, the first ever public art exhibition on the National Mall, curated by an organization called Monument Lab. And it was called Beyond Granite, pulling together and framed around this theme of what stories remain untold on the National Mall. And one of your artworks by Paul Ramirez Jonas is a pyramid-like structure that has a hanging bell apparatus that plays bells in tones running down. And then the final bell, an audience member has to hit it to complete the song. So it's about democracy and participation in our nation. And I just used it as a model in conversations with Ife to think about how we can explore the shape of a floating cocoon or object without replicating the sort of hangman tea stand that we associate with gibbets.
Thank you, Jasper. And when I looked at the image, I said, wow, this works. This would be great. I also wanted to incorporate the Congo cosmogram, which is part of the Congo, the people of the Congo. It's part of their religious pantheon, and it has 4 points. And a lot of people like to look a lot of times when they look at the symbol, they look at it like, oh, it's a Christian cross. And I mean, my feeling is, which came first, the chicken or the egg? You know, in my belief system, everything comes out of Africa. So these 4 points represent birth, life, death, and rebirth. And when I saw the photograph from the artist in DC, I looked at I looked at the bottom, and I said, oh my God, it's a Congo cosmogram right there at the bottom. And I don't think this artist, that's not what they were thinking, but when I saw it, that's what I saw. And I wanted to definitely incorporate that into this piece. Also, this piece has a quilt-like pattern. There are lots of symbols that connect Africa and African American culture, because Africans shape-shifted into African Americans. So the quilt is a big part of our history and our tradition, which really a lot of people, there's been research done that quilting in the African American tradition is really connected to the Egungun costumery. And Egun is the word for ancestor. If you look at their garments that they wear, a lot of them are in a quilt-like, what we would call a quilt-like pattern. I'm not sure what it's called in the motherland, but here, that's what it nods to. And the very first person that I met that was an artist is my grandmother, who was an astute quilt maker. Like everyone had a quilt, and I don't even understand how she did it. She made so many of them, and she never used a sewing machine. So that is what the pattern is there. That's why the Congo cosmogram is there. The indigo, my fabrics here are definitely a connection to Africa and the Americas. Because
Fabulous. You know, it's so fascinating to hear the background from both of your viewpoints. Really makes this come alive so much more than my visit and touring. So this is going to be so beneficial for viewers to better appreciate your work. And I know as we move on, Ife, you want to give tribute to the fabricators. So a couple of words as we look through some wonderful images.
Sure. BRM Production Management. One of the things that's so lovely about this project is that it is next level for myself as a creator and my work. And I've worked with people who've helped me build the ancestor slave cabins, but I never thought of them in terms as fabricators. I thought of them as, these are my friends and they're helping me and they happen to have these skills. And so the BRM Production Management, I love them. And I love them a lot because it's a woman-owned company, first of all. And I never had a chance to meet Bianca, who is the owner, but Jane and Ree were the people who I directly worked with Jasper. They came to my home, they photographed my tapestries. They also photographed a moonshine jug that you do have a slide of here somewhere. And that was part of the initial, the actual shape of the squares. So these images are images that I took when I visited the workshop in North Chelmsford. The first time I went in accompaniment with Leo Crowley, who works with now and there, and then I went on my own. And I was just so, the first time I went, it was the shell. They showed me none of this had happened yet. None of what we're seeing right now. It was made out of a wooden frame with foam, and they carved the foam. They let me carve some of the foam. I was also able to do a small ritual while I was there to bless the cocoon. And I just really loved working with them, and I plan to continue to work with them in some capacity, because now my work is it's just on a whole other level.
It's fabulous. Well, would definitely like to hear more of the whole process, but for the sake of time, we're going to move on and just show these wonderful reproductions as we get to a very powerful piece that we want to include in the program. And that's a video, Ife, of procession that you held June 22nd, I believe, honoring the resurrection of Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe. Before we enjoy this clip, just a little background and a few words, what we can look forward to seeing, please.
From myself or Jasper?
Yourself, and then if
Oh.
Jeff would like to add, please do.
Part of what I wanted to include in this piece was a procession. I have held quite a few of them here in the city of Boston, and I'm going to continue to hold them, as there are many, many markers and historical places here in Boston where you can actually see headstones of the enslaved. A lot of times in the South, there aren't any, and I'm very curious to know why. That is something for another conversation. But this procession I presented to Lot Lab. They were very excited about it. And it's a way to get community engaged in what we're doing. You know, not just put the sculpture there and have people come and read the plaque, but I could engage with them. I could meet them. I taught them a mantra that I created for Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe. And what was incredibly exciting, as far as this person, we were trying to figure out, okay, where are we going to walk? What are we going to do? And then there was a woman named Ashley, who was at the opening of Lot Lab, and she works with historical societies and archaeologists in Charlestown. And she sent me an email, and she said, we found the exact coordinates to where the house was, where the estate of John Codman was, and it wasn't far from there. Jasper figured it out that it wasn't that far, and so that's how we created the procession route.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, let's take this moment and enjoy the clip.
Mark, Phyllis, Phoebe. Mark, Phyllis, Phoebe. I'm an artist. I'm queer. I'm Black. I'm hoodoo. Okay, hoodoo. Hoodoo in Southern tradition is really the synchronicity of African tradition and Christianity. So, you know, when people think of the resurrection, they think of Jesus coming back. So this is Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe coming back in a different way, coming back loved. Okay, when Jesus came out of that cave, people were loving Jesus. You know, that's how I'm thinking about Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe. They're coming back. They never left. They're coming back. We're coming here today to invite them in and to let them know how much they are loved and cared for. Like I cannot emphasize that enough. And I feel like that's a lot of what my practice is. It's about uplifting my ancestors. They all had stories. They all had names. They had families. You know, they had heart. They're human beings who didn't get to live in their own humanness.
Wow, so powerful. And I can't think of anything that better epitomizes what Lot Lab is all about. I think you'll agree, Jasper, engagement being one of the primary goals of Lot Lab in its initial construction. Before we look at one more image of Ife, just a comment or reflection, Jasper, of this experience.
Absolutely. I think as Ife hinted earlier, leading up to the program, we didn't exactly know what the route would be or where we would walk. And at the opening, just a week or two before, we learned about the property lines of the Codman estate, the enslaver of Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe. And it felt so serendipitous, I would say, to discover that it was a 5-minute walk from where the installation was. And I think that that energy is what carried into and throughout the program. When we were first at the park or on the property line after we walked there, and Ife started teaching us the chant and saying the names of Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe, I think the wind picked up, and everyone who was in our group could really feel that energy.
Mm.
And everyone who was there was so full of love and care, and people who didn't know the details of the story, folks who were just walking by on the sidewalk, just seeing what's happening, were interested in learning about it and wanting to get involved. And so my initial reflection is to share that just being together and having each other's presence and walking together was a catalyst for conversation and for change. Tears were shed that day, and I thought it was really a really powerful example of how public art can really break down barriers and walls, and invite people to be more vulnerable and talk about hard histories, but also heal from them. And something that I appreciated learning from Ife, if I may say it, when we first were talking about this program, she made it clear to me that while this is primarily for African descended individuals and the healing is for them and for the ancestors, these kind of stories and this kind of history, this healing is for everyone. It did really, and it's important to think about that and see that impact as well.
Wonderful. So well put. Thank you, Jasper, for adding that commentary.
Can I
Ife,
just jump in here? I'm sorry. I just want to jump in 1 second. I also want to
please,
say that
please do.
For me, there is no serendipity. For me, Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe wanted us to know where they were. So they sent their energy to Ashley, who sent her energy to us. Like, they are working, they are churning, they're here. And I also want to, another really incredible component to the day was Marlene Boyette's sound bath, and with her crystal bowls. She is a wellness practitioner here, trauma-informed yoga practitioner. And I knew that usually at these processions, I'll have drummers, you know, and that's a certain kind of energy. It's hot, you know, and I wanted something cool. I wanted something relaxing because they had already experienced enough power in a way that I wanted a different sort of really relaxing, loving power entity added.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, before we move on to the other artist at Lot Lab this year, Ife, just a brief comment about this exquisite image, the death mask for Mark.
Oh, okay. The death mask. I completed this a few days before I shared it with you. I shared it with Jasper right away because I knew that it was a death mask for Mark. it didn't start out that way. It was very intuitive. I had been working on this particular piece for a while. I went on vacation to Aruba earlier in the year. I took this piece with me,
Mhm.
and I didn't know it was going to be a death mask. I was
Mm.
working more on what looks like the background of
Mm.
all the imagery there, and this is how my drawings always come to me. They come to me in this very intuitive way. I start out not knowing what it's going to be. I don't, that's not my intention, is to know what it's going to be. And it always turns out to be something incredibly dynamic, incredibly beautiful, and definitely on an ancestral realm.
Mhm.
So this is
Wonderful.
to represent him. This is representing his spirit, his DNA, his cellular memory, his Africanness, his connection to life. And again, it's to honor his presence. And I'm very grateful because I really believe that Mark's spirit comes through me to channel through me. I am a vessel. He wanted this. And so I'm very happy that I was able to do it for him.
Thank you so much for sharing. Jasper, we're going to move on to the other two artists that you introduced us to at the beginning. First, Matthew Okazaki. Could you share a little bit about Matthew?
Absolutely. So what you're looking at is an artwork called Torii. It's a 10-foot architectural sculpture modeled after Japanese torii gates, made of construction materials such as concrete and recycled wood rendered in a vibrant vermilion. Matthew Okazaki, the artist of this work, is an architect by training and a designer based out of Boston who teaches at Tufts University. And his research and work centers around this creative practice of making do. He's really inspired in how marginalized communities, and specifically in his research, Japanese American communities, use ordinary materials and the readily available to create new meaning and modes of understanding in their everyday lives. In his own research, his grandfather was incarcerated during World War II here in the United States at Japanese American internment camps. And so Matthew has really been interested in how people who were in internment camps dignified and beautified their spaces. They made their own Zen gardens while being housed at horse stables, for example. And so his work is really interested in representing that resilient spirit reflected in Japanese American internment camps and elsewhere. And so for this artwork, we were in conversation about what the history of Japanese American presence was in Charlestown. We learned some fun anecdotes. There was a gentleman, a veteran named Kinzo Hamano, who served in World War II, from an article in the Charlestown Patriot Bridge, who lived in Charlestown. And we were going down the wormhole thinking of what to land on. Well, before we noticed during a site visit that there was a torii gate already on the site. And it was actually a torii gate. You can see it from Lot Lab, from where this artwork is. It's on the other side of the bush in this photo. And Matthew, as an architect, noticed that it was incorrect. It was the wrong color, the wrong scale, the wrong dimensions, and it was devoid of meaning. It has a bench and a bell under it. And torii gates, in the traditional Shinto belief system of Japan, they embody key elements that signify the connection and transition between the physical plane and the spiritual plane, not too different, although different cultural contexts from the Kongo cosmogram, the Dikenga that Ife was mentioning earlier in our conversation, right? The cosmological symbol that represents the boundary between the physical and spiritual. And then Matthew realized further on that the torii gate had long been used by the US military as a symbol to represent service in East Asia. And we started talking about how, to some, this might be a symbol of Western colonial expansion in the Asias. To others, it could be a symbol of liberation from the Japanese's own colonial empire prior to 1945. And we realized that this symbol, while it certainly represents complex history and can become attached to notions of occupation and nationalism and war, was stripped of its original function. So Matthew wanted to recreate a torii gate and make one that actually was true to its intended function as a passageway into this lot lab with this torii gate in Ife's sculpture, the resurrection, that blurs the boundaries between the physical and spiritual plane, that honors our ancestors, and it's intentionally designed to look as if it's in a state of incompleteness, as if it's in, you can't really tell if it's under construction, if it's done being made, if it's from the past or in the future. He really wanted it to be weathered because he wants it to sort of flatten out time and make present, back to our theme, our past, our future, and in his own words, our now.
Nice. And as we have this close-up here, we see these cards, the writing. Could you share this contribution, which I think gets at the engagement, the participatory nature of all the work that you hope the creators are making?
Absolutely. So when looking at the foundational elements of a torii gate, there's the horizontal and vertical beams. There's a type of rope, a braided rope we saw in previous images called the shimenawa. And there's these zigzag paper streamers called shide that are associated with divine presence and purification and facilitate that connection between the earthly and spiritual. And we wanted to incorporate forms inspired by shide, but not replicating them, of course, because of their intention and religious ceremony. And so we commissioned an artist, Maria Fong, a really wonderful designer who's created murals and work around Chinatown and other neighborhoods in Boston, to design this accessible, short and sweet charm that asks folks, where is your community? And who or what is important in your presence in your community? And so every weekend we have art ambassadors on site who talk about these prompts with visitors and then attach them to the rebar of one of the sculptures. So what you end up with is when you come into this space and you're thinking about this theme of presence and these artworks and our ancestors and our communities, you can also read what people have contributed. And there's notes here that say, my community is Charlestown, my community is the South End, my community is Dorchester. And really get a sense of what place means to other people beyond Charlestown, which I think is really impactful when you get to sit and meditate and reflect on these stories.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, thank you for giving us some insight into Matthew Okazaki's contribution. Again, another very powerful installation, and we can see in the background there, your work, the resurrection, Ife, on the same piece of land. Moving off this area, but close by Jasper, is Hugh Hayden's contribution, Gulf Stream. A few words about Mr. Hayden and then what he's created and contributed.
Absolutely. And I'll try my best to keep us in line with our time commitment. I want to be respectful of that for you, Jay. Hugh Hayden is a really incredible, nationally and internationally recognized artist who uses the natural world as a visceral lens for exploring the human condition. His most commonly used medium that he's associated with is wood. And it's because to him, wood has multi-layered histories in its origin. And he often imbues recycled wood or discarded wood, things like rare timbers, Christmas trees, souvenir African sculptures, to combine different species of wood and create these almost surrealist forms that reflects not just their complex cultural backgrounds, but in his words, invite us to consider the human experience, the human existence, and also the American dream. He thinks a lot about the American dream as something that is seductive, but as you engage with it and get closer to it, you find out that it's much more complicated and dangerous than it looks up close. The work we're looking at, Gulfstream, unlike the other two works, is not a brand new site-specific commission. It is a loaned work, and it was first shown in New York City in 2022 in an exhibition called Blank Atlantic at Brooklyn Bridge Park. And what you're looking at is a boat built in the tradition of clinker-built boats, and it has a whale-like skeletal interior. And this work is symbolically alluding to the lives lost at sea during the Middle Passage, the forced trafficking of enslaved Africans to North America. And it's just a few steps away from Lot Lab, and we wanted to present this work near the water as it was presented in the past. And it's important for us to present this work here because as a major port city during the colonial era, Boston played a key role in this history of the transatlantic slave trade. We know that the first slave trade voyage from the American colonies sailed out of Massachusetts. And we're also connecting it to Boston, I'll say, in two other ways briefly. On one hand, we know that the USS Constitution, further in the Navy Yard, contains live oak timbers dangerously harvested by enslaved labor on the coastal islands of Georgia. And it's shocking to me to think about how on the Freedom Trail, we're thinking of the USS Constitution, this amazing legacy of American Revolution, how that's founded still, like most of our nation, on the enslaved labor and the lives of African ancestors in our nation. So we're looking at this vessel and we're connecting it to the USS Constitution as a landmark. And the final thing I'll say is that its namesake is Gulfstream, a painting by Winslow Homer, a Boston-born and bred landscape painter who's often associated with maritime iconography. So it's been recontextualized and painted after another painting of Winslow Homer's called After the Hurricane Bahamas from 1899 with the white body and the blue strip on the bottom.
No, it was fascinating to read some of that background on the website about all the contributors to give us a little insight. Ife, up to now, what's been some of the reaction and feedback you've heard from your resurrection piece?
I've received nothing other than positive wonderment. Actually, people engage with the sculpture, people look up at it in wonder, and which translates to me as love for Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe. So that's how, and people are just stunned by actually the actual beauty of it. What I thought was really interesting was when I had sent you the images, you were already at the lot lab, which I did not know.
That was incredible kismet.
Yes.
I got the text as I was right on the site. Unbelievable.
So can I reflect to you and ask you, what was your reaction when you saw the sculpture? What is it? How did it make you feel?
Well, I really appreciated reading beforehand some of the commentary to truly appreciate it and see the meaning, and hearing you so eloquently share even more depth of what it's all about. It's just very powerful. Together with the video clip, yeah, it's overwhelming, I think, of an experience. And
I hope
just,
in the most beautiful way, though.
oh, most definitely. No,
Okay.
it's so meaningful. I mean, it just,
Okay.
as I said, signifies what in this, moving on from now and there, what the Boston Public Art Triennial is all about. And like yours, Matthews and Hughes, so many other talented artists in this area and beyond that participate in these efforts, which is just going to grow geometrically. Incredible kickoff next year, but years to come, because we've just seen, and and I don't have to tell both of you, over say the last 15, 20 years, the value, the benefits, the thirst for
And the
public
shift. And the shift.
art,
Yes.
in your local neighborhood, in bigger
Yes.
cities like Boston. The value of the arts just needs to be underscored. And I think there's a rising from everyday people to support those efforts and to make them happen, and to see people like yourselves and colleagues actualize those, is, yeah, just the benefit for all of us. As a footnote, especially in these times when other things can dominate
Mhm.
presence, to see the value and the positivity, the meaningfulness of human existence. So yeah, no, is wonderful, wonderful. And I know it's going to be available for weeks to come. So lots of time for people, the general public, to make their way to the Naval Yard, as well as look out, Jasper, for other work that's around. If you want to share just some other things or ways people can keep in touch.
Absolutely. As you were just mentioning, folks who are watching, you're invited to see the artworks for yourself at Lot Lab in the Charlestown Navy Yard. The address is 1 5th Street, Charlestown. It's right next to Dry Dock 2. You can take the ferry from Long Wharf there, the ferry to Charlestown. I think it's a very fun trip. And you can learn more about our works on our website. It's thetriennial.org, TheTriennial.org. Other than Lot Lab, we have some accelerator projects coming up this fall from local artists. We have a project coming to the Eggleston Square branch of the Boston Public Library, a project's coming to the Boston Children's Museum, right on the Harbor Walk, for example. And we also have a work up right now at Central Wharf Park in front of the aquarium by an artist named Edra Soto. She's a Puerto Rican artist from Chicago.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And Ife, yourself, how can viewers and others find out more about your work and keep in touch, perhaps get in touch about other upcoming exhibitions, private showings, etc.?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. People can go to my website, www.ifearts.com, where they can go to my shop, purchase a copy of my book or conjure bottle, read more about my project and my process. I would love that, absolutely. Or send me an email. That would be great.
Terrific, terrific. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. I want to thank you again, both of you, for taking the time to so eloquently present background information about the Boston Public Art Triennial, and Ife for sharing your work that's on display now, The Resurrection of Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe, as well as giving a little sense of your whole approach and some of the other projects you've been involved with. Continued success for both of you for future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you so much.
For reaching out and having us here. And anytime I get to
Thank
spend
you.
time with Jasper is really, really sweet.
Thank you, Ife. Always a blessing to be in conversation with you.
Wonderful, wonderful to both of you. Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune us next time.
Peace and love.